Hi, Olga Sheean. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
It's great to be here with you and have the opportunity to have this interview with you. Now, briefly for people who don't know you yet, you're an author of 8 books, which are non-fiction books. So,
Fiction and non-fiction.
oh, actually,
Yes.
you have also fiction
On
books.
similar
Okay.
themes, but nonetheless fiction as well as non-fiction.
Okay. But for all your non-fiction books, you definitely did a lot of research. So in my view, you're also a researcher. You've worked as a photojournalist for the UN, I guess.
For WWF
Oh, WWF.
International.
Great. And you're a practitioner.
Yes.
What do
A
you do there?
therapist. I specialize in relationships and human dynamics, looking at the subconscious programming that tends to drive us and shape our lives.
That's interesting. When did you get started with that?
Out of necessity, needing to address some of my own issues, going way back now, probably 30 years,
Wow.
when I was grappling with all kinds of dysfunctional stuff, as so many of us do in relationships and interactions with others in terms of work, and many challenges, personal challenges that I experienced that pushed me to go deeper. And in my work, I started exploring the subconscious, which by definition is beyond our awareness, and there's a lot of stuff. Most of the stuff that affects us is actually lodged there, and we're very unaware of how it drives our lives, how it affects us, the impact it has, or how to address it.
That's interesting. And so you've been doing this therapy now for
Many years.
helping other
30
people for
yes.
many decades.
Yes.
So that, of course, gives you also a lot of experiences and insights into that area.
Yes, and I've incorporated a lot of that into my work, into my writings and my videos and other documents.
That's interesting. Yeah, and last but not least, you're an expert, maybe not on a scientific level in that sense, but definitely an expert with a lot of experience, practical experience, when it comes to man-made electromagnetic fields, or short EMFs,
Yes.
which I also like to call just wireless radiation, because it comes from all our wireless devices, I believe. And and that's where actually my first question also kicks in, on how did you become an expert in this, and what, in your view, is a man-made electromagnetic field?
Right. Well, once again, it came out of necessity. I think it started to affect me much sooner than I actually realized. I remember when, as a teenager, going shopping, and being in shopping centers profoundly affected me. I couldn't stay for more than 10 or 20 minutes. I would get waves of heat and dizziness and nausea. And it was before the time of Wi-Fi and all of the, the rampant wireless radiation that we have now. But there were probably cordless phones and other things, lots of other magnetic fields, electrical and magnetic fields, that I was sensitive to, but had no idea. And it wasn't until several decades after that that I actually developed a tumor, an acoustic neuroma that is known to be caused by wireless radiation, and it sits on the auditory vestibular nerve, so it affects balance and hearing. And I ultimately had to be operated on for that. And that really was a huge wake-up call that got me looking much deeper into the whole issue of wireless radiation, how it was affecting us. And since that time, I can physically feel the radiation. I probably could feel it before, I just didn't know what it was. I had this buzzing in my head, my brain was profoundly affected. I'd get dizziness, I'd go into a shop, wouldn't remember why I was in there, brain fog, all of the things that these people report when they're affected by EMFs. So that was a huge turning point for me. In fact, really upset my life tremendously, but also set me on a course to live a much simpler, healthier life as I began to understand the extent of it and the impact it was having on our environment and on everybody, every form of life.
Wow. And so that tumor, how many years ago was that? Like 20 years or?
That was in 2012 I was operated, and I think it actually happened quite fast once I started to feel something happening in my brain. It was only a matter of a year or two before I was diagnosed with the tumor. So I think it actually grew quite fast, despite what scientists or doctors might claim in the mainstream media. So yes, that's going back 13 years now. I still have neurological sort of fallout from that. But obviously, having removed myself from, being surrounded by and saturated in this radiation, I'm a lot better.
Yeah, because that was my question. My next question is, how did it affect your life, feeling all of these, all this invisible electrosmog, which is anyway there very much? How did it feel, or how did you have to adapt to that?
On every level, I think, personal, professional, social. It was very difficult to socialize after getting that tumor and developing that extreme sensitivity, and then knowing what it was that I was feeling, and needing to avoid that because I'd become more sensitive to it once I had, the surgery on those relevant nerves. So that was a big shift for me, to lose my sense of community and to not be able to connect with people of like mind, and have those interactions that we all need. There were also health effects, obviously, affected my daily functioning, fatigue, insomnia. I had insomnia for well over a decade now. That was extreme. And again, I didn't understand what was really happening, but there was something I discovered that made quite a big difference related to EMFs, which I'll explain in a moment. And so a lot of stuff to do with nutrition, adjusting my diet, my environment, obviously needing to pull away from any sources of the radiation to get myself well. And some people say, well, if you remove yourself from it, then maybe don't you become more sensitive, as a result of having sort of isolated yourself from the radiation. And I don't think that's really how it works. I think we cannot heal from this radiation if we are still steeped in it, and I certainly couldn't. And had I known that I was being so heavily bombarded with wireless radiation at the time, perhaps I could have avoided having a tumor and all the fallout that came from that. So yes, I had to withdraw from it. I'm still, I like to think, in a fairly healthy environment. We live in a stone house where the stone walls buffer the radiation from the outside and do provide some healthy protection from that. There is some neurological fallout as well, a lot of sort of tingling and balance issues sometimes, but I do believe that the nerves can regrow over time, and that can take many, many years. So I have a very positive outlook, and I like to think that it prompted me to really reclaim a level of autonomy that I didn't have, and definitely deepened my self-awareness about, what this whole thing represents and why we are being bombarded and why governments are doing what they're doing and industry is causing so much damage to people and planet.
Yeah, we'll go into that in more depth. But while you were speaking, two things came to my mind. One is, I've heard from many other experts as well that when you say the body didn't get time to recover, the body needs to recover, you need to get out of the radiation to recover. I heard it from many other people, especially as the night sleep is so important, that you don't have radiation there and all this stuff. I think it's pretty widely acknowledged. And when you say, you told me before that you moved like 20 or 30 times since 2012, I believe, or so. So is it hard to find a place without radiation?
It is, yes. We were very lucky to find this place that didn't have a smart meter, a wireless meter. And there are very few of those left. But we traveled around a lot trying to find a country that was perhaps more aware and more open to protecting its population from this stuff. We didn't really find it. But here in France, we have managed to at least find a little corner where I can function pretty well and get stronger. So building resilience over time has been part of it. So yes, a lot of upheaval, a lot of people experience this, and not everybody has the ability to move, or withstand that expense or give up a job. Right. So it's very, very difficult for people who are subjected to this and can't get away from it.
Yeah, how many people do you think are affected already? Maybe without knowing it, but what do you think is the percentage in the population?
I would say that as much as half the population is being affected. Perhaps 10%, 15% might know they're being affected and are aware of the impact and perhaps, hopefully, doing something about it. But a huge percentage, I see so much cancer. Our landlady has had 3 or 4 brain tumours, still won't give up her cell phone, even though we've kind of talked about it.
Whoa.
Next door neighbours, 2 brain tumours. I mean, it's all around us. And, it's almost become the norm to think, well, what kind of cancer have you got? As if it's just an anticipated thing in life, an inevitable part of modern living. And that's, I think, quite tragic.
That's extremely tragic. I mean, I read on your website, there was this, you quoted this doctor or linked to a doctor's newsletter that also said, who listed all these studies showing that also children, and especially brain cancer in children, is so much on the rise since the cell phones have been introduced.
That's right. Yes, and many other things, as I mentioned, the insomnia, nervous disorders, ADHD, children in school who are being subjected to Wi-Fi and who are considered to be slow, maybe even mentally retarded, and it's, in most cases, it's caused by the Wi-Fi, because I know what that does to my brain. I can feel what it does. I feel quite stupified.
Oh yeah, I know that too.
When you have that feeling.
Yeah.
And so I can understand, I really, really feel for these children who are subjected to that. Yeah. And the parents just do not have a clue. So that's tough.
That's extremely tough. And speaking about those symptoms, I mean, I think many people feel that if you work in a company or wherever you are and there's Wi-Fi, I mean, I know that personally as well. After some time, you definitely feel like your brain, is kind of off, and you actually have this definition on one of your websites about microwave sickness, and I just wanted to quote this and ask for your take on that. So Merriam-Webster actually defines microwave sickness as a condition of impaired health, first reported in the Russian medical literature, that is characterized by headaches, anxiety, sleep disturbances, fatigue, and difficulty in concentrating, and by changes in the cardiovascular and central nervous systems. And that is held to be caused by a prolonged exposure to low-intensity microwave radiation. Now you say 50% of the population already are experiencing this. Do you get many people in your therapy that come because of that reason, or?
Some do. I think many, especially the younger people that I work with more and more now, are really oblivious to this and can't really hear me. We do talk about some of these issues, but they're so attached to their cell phone, and it has become so much a part of their lives that they feel, it would compromise them greatly professionally and personally if they gave it up. So that's a huge stumbling block for most people, as you know. Yeah. And it's interesting because I'll talk a little bit in a moment about what we've lost over time in terms of separating from our humanity. And this has led to this inanimate sort of tech takeover that we're in the process of undergoing. And so because of that, people are more and more sort of outsourcing their humanity, using gadgets, relying on gadgets to do things that we actually can do and can do much better. There are many, many things. Our brain is hugely underutilized, and we have higher faculties that we do not engage. Yes. That really, I see that all of this stuff on the outside, everything that's missing, that we're not getting, say, from governments or industry, and is really just showing us what's missing in us, what's missing in humanity now that we need to reclaim and rebuild. And that's a tough one to sell because so many people are enthralled by the technology. They just love it. They think it's the greatest thing ever. And what is your problem, Olga? Just get with the program. So there is that whole sort of mentality around it, and young people especially, who have never known anything else. And even older people my age or older than me, who no longer remember that we used to plug everything in, that we used to hardwire and cable our appliances. They simply have no awareness of that now.
Right.
So, yes, it's pervasive.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to get into that next with this. What do you think is a root cause behind the tech takeover. But when you're speaking with these young people and are trying to open their eyes to the net that's around them, so to speak, how do you go about that? What are your top 3 arguments or so to convince somebody who's, enthralled with their smartphone to voluntarily put it away, or to cut, separate from that technology?
Normally the doorway in is their addiction to social media. And young people, they admit themselves, I have to keep checking my phone. It's like a nervous tick. And I've seen this with my nephews as well, and nieces. It's literally like an extension of their limb. Yes. And so that's normally where I go in and say, well, look, how does this affect you? Well, I stay up all night, I'm looking at the screen, I'm checking in on my friends, I want to know what they think of me, did everybody like my post, all of this stuff. It's become an addiction all of its own, and it affects the brain hugely. And some say, there are reports out there and studies that show that it's a greater addiction than heroin, more difficult to kick than heroin. Yeah. So there's all this dopamine release, the feel-good factor that happens with social media sort of frenzy. So we start there. And putting away the cell phone, turning it off, getting back to better sleep, better exposure to natural light, all of these simple things. Because usually the people that come to me are having severe enough problems that they know they need to change something. They're extremely stressed at work, they're getting overworked, overextended, and unable to keep juggling things. So that's where we start. And sometimes we can go quite a bit further and get them to understand.
Sorry to interject here, but do you experience the people as being unable to focus? Do you think that's a
Yeah, I think that's
too?
Part of it. Yeah. Yes, and having this obsession with just checking in and staying connected. Ironically, staying connected to people whereas in that process they become more and more disconnected, and they no longer really understand the body or feel the body and know what the body needs, because they're so focused on the externals and getting that fix. And so getting them to see that what's happening in your body, look what you're doing to your body, look what's happened to your hormones, look what happens to your sleep, and your anxiety. A lot of people, young people, are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. No. And I think, well, that's actually not normal. What can we do about that? How am I changing this? Let's try this and see, how that affects things. And if your whole system calms down, because the radiation, it agitates the nervous system, it stimulates tissue, so it has this very agitating effect. In fact, many people only sort of feel alive when they're in a heavily Wi-Fi'd environment, because they're constantly sort of up and agitated. It's a stimulant. Constantly
vibrating, so to speak. So you actually tell young people to try it out, leave away the smartphone to see if they recover?
Yes, well, we take it in baby steps.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at the social media to start with, and then going deeper into how their sleep might be affected by the wireless radiation, how to get away from it, turn it off at night, starting with those small steps.
Positive effects?
Yeah, definitely. But they're still hooked. So it's a tough one because they're in an environment, they're working, they go to a job, they're exposed to it all day long, they use their phone maybe for their work. It's a tough one to untangle. Yeah. Very often, and this tends to be part of the human condition, we have to be hit over the head, or we have to have a big wake-up call to really get the message and put aside what is effectively killing us.
Isn't it? Yeah. That's what I'm asking myself also very often. I mean, what has to happen till humanity gets this?
Yeah.
I mean, will it be too late? Will we manage in time? I mean, we see all the young kids, age 11, getting their first smartphones. Most of the population sooner than that. Most of the population unaware. I don't know. I mean, what's your idea? How do we? How do we get the word out, or get people to voluntarily cut off this extra limb that has been attached to most people out there? Yeah,
that's a very tough one. And this is more the focus of my work now. I was an activist for many years, producing my book and other material. and doing videos and all of that stuff. But now I've kind of zoomed out, and because I have that experience in human dynamics and that expertise in looking at subconscious programming, what I see very, very clearly, and this has been confirmed for me over many decades now, is that everything we see out there, all the crises, all the upheaval, the chaos, the destruction of our environment upon which we depend, these are all the symptoms of human dysfunction. And human dysfunction comes from ancestral indoctrination. And this happened a long time ago. We go back many, many centuries to when this actually kicked in. And if you think about what's happening in the world right now, you think about the insanity of it, what governments are doing to us, what the wireless industry is doing to us, it makes no sense. Yeah. It makes no sense to persecute us and terrorize us and manipulate us and misinform us and coerce us into taking harmful pharmaceuticals. And, it's all part of a global agenda designed to take control, but it's nothing to do with health, safety, democracy, human rights, none of that stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, who of us would be doing this if we were president?
Right.
I mean, nobody in his, in a good meaning mind would be doing that now.
Yeah. So way back, we're going back 17 centuries now, back to the early 300s, our ancestors were very brutally indoctrinated with a new doctrine. This was the Christian doctrine that was forced upon them in the most brutal way. And if they didn't convert, they were massacred, they were persecuted, they were tortured. Young children had to see their parents being burned alive. I mean, it was really, really brutal. Of course, nobody alive today has any awareness of this or thinks anything about it or even goes looking for any reason as to why the world is the way it is today. But there is a direct connection between what happened back then and what is happening now. And I'll just walk you through that a little bit. So our ancestors were very wise people. There was the peasant class, pagan peasants who were very much attached to the land, very connected to the land. And there was the intellectual class that was very expert in metaphysics, cosmology, astronomy, the esoteric sciences. And they were very connected to nature. They understood natural phenomena, the power of nature to heal, the therapeutic remedies that could be found in nature. And they actually were able to co-create with the cosmos, which sounds very sort of out there. But they were highly attuned spiritually. And when they were forced to submit and convert to this alien doctrine, they lost all of that. Their libraries were burned, their books were burned, all their wisdom, the wisdom of antiquity was destroyed. A whole culture was just crushed. And what came out of this is that they lost many key elements that are still missing today, in fact have deepened in terms of us missing out on them. Yeah. The first one is autonomy. They were spiritually autonomous. They had spiritual sovereignty. They did not need an external authority to tell them how to live. They did not need this sort of alien God telling them what they were worth. So they lost that. They lost that connection. They also lost their healthy sense of self-worth, of self-acceptance, and faith in self, most of all, because they understood the nature of reality and the power of nature. They did not have the kind of irrational fears that we have, the doubts, the insecurities, the self-doubts that so many people have today, and the fears. And so all of that was taken away as well. They lost their sense of safety. And the safety comes from understanding how things work, understanding your own body, how your mind works, the power that we have as humans to have an impact on our environment and actually create our reality, which is a very out there concept for most people. And they also lost that connectedness, the connection they had to themselves, to others, to nature, to the cosmos, the universe, to universal intelligence or God or whatever you want to call that.
Right.
And so as a result of that, our evolution was basically derailed at that point. And we started, I call that moment in time the split. And that from then we became progressively more denatured. All aspects of our world have become progressively denatured. Our food started with our food. and medicine, the environment, so many things. Even our minds now and our bodies are being implanted with things, with devices, with all kinds of stuff coming at us, being imposed on us. And we're getting further and further away from our humanity. And that brings us to where we are today, on the brink of this tech takeover, where we're so far away from our essential nature and humanity and our human nature that most people don't even know what that is. They don't even understand that that is missing. They don't perhaps really even know what humanity means or what it means to be a fully actualized human being. And so I see that all these symptoms out there are pushing us to get to root cause. Because for as long as we are oblivious to the root cause and we don't address it, the symptoms keep getting worse. So, that distortion of the psyche, that effectively led to a corruption of our human psyche, a gross distortion of our psyche and of the mind and of the spirit, the human spirit. And it created all kinds of guilt, shame, low self-worth, self-rejection, which led to addiction, all kinds of negative behaviors, destructive behaviors. And this is why we're destroying our environment. It makes no sense for us it makes no sense for us to destroy the planet on which we depend. But when you understand your programming, it makes perfect sense, because we actually have been programmed to self-destruct. And so we know from just personal relationships, that are dysfunctional, that we need acceptance, we're hoping to be loved, we're desperate for acknowledgement, for a sense of belonging, for being loved by other people and accepted for who we are, approved of. All of that stuff runs us because we have that deep unmet need that humans have to connect, but also to be who we really are.
Well, why do you think this breach that you were speaking about, like 300 years, when was it? 300 years after Christ, or
the early 300s.
Early 300s, right.
Yes, in the time of Emperor Constantine. That's when the church-state kicked in. Yeah.
And from then on, you say this shift began where more and more things got imposed or were forced onto people. How do you believe they managed to impose that on the entire world population, so to speak?
Well, through persecution and massacre. It happened over time. There was the Spanish Inquisition. Even during the Renaissance, there was kind of an attempted resurgence of the wisdom of antiquity, and that was once again crushed by the church. So the church did an absolute wholesale job of crushing any kind of resistance to the imposition of this doctrine, which was really an inhuman doctrine. When you think about it, I mean, people get very, very worked up about religion, and understandably, because they're so deeply programmed that when you challenge them, it feels almost like an attack on their sense of self, because our sense of self was shaped by what happened back then, very much.
Yeah.
So, it becomes, I always say, there's this conundrum. Our programming is the very thing that gets in the way of us realizing that it's the very thing that's getting in our way. So, talking about Christianity, another important point to remember is that right now, the point we are in our evolution or devolution, it doesn't matter whether we're religious or not. I'm not religious. I would say I'm spiritual. I have that connection. I feel that connection to the greater power, whatever it is, universal intelligence. But this is not about religion anymore. This is about programming. And the programming was designed for control, just as this second takeover is trying to do the same thing. So people can get very highly charged about the religious issue and start defending it and think that they get into the whole aspect of religion, which is not what this is about. This is, I try to keep people on track with, this is programming. It started there. But, your beliefs are safe inside you. If you've got religious beliefs that work for you, fantastic. Use them. Run with them. We can't touch those anyway. So we don't need to defend beliefs. Right. We don't need to defend or get worked up about them, but we do because we've been so deeply programmed. And in all of that mix, there's the huge fear, the primal fear, the trauma that we have embedded in our DNA that came from that earlier time of massacre and persecution and torture. That's deeply embedded in us. And so we react very strongly when that's challenged. We must obey. This is what was bred into us. We have to obey. It's scary not to. You might die if you don't. That's what's in there.
I mean, I would agree, although I'm a Christian, to be honest, but I think what you're describing, it destroyed true Christianity as well, because like when one looks at Jesus, or what he did, he was empowering people, not taking away from them. He was healing them. He was showing them that they can rule over their worries and their whatever ailments they had. And then in the name of this, as you say, these inquisitors come and brutally beat down humanity. And so and we see the fruit. I mean, as you say, we see a people that's very vulnerable to fear-mongering.
Yes, exactly. There's a huge fear of government, of authority, and a deference to them. And ironically, the very people who are harming us are the people we turn to. So there's this growing reliance on governments and gadgets, to fix us, to rescue us, to comfort us, to distract us from our pain. It's all part of the human dysfunction. So, for me, all I can see is that activism, yes, okay, and education, up to a point, it's great to get people informed if they want the information, but it doesn't ultimately change anything. Fundamentally, it doesn't change things. And I would really encourage people who are affected by the wireless radiation to try to start understanding it in this context, that everything that's happening out there is a result of our collective programming. And so trying to deal with symptoms changes nothing unless we go back inside each one of us and start to get to grips with that negative programming, which is running us and often ruining our lives. Then really, I just see that things get worse, because we know if we don't address the root cause, the symptoms will get worse. So this is what I talk about in my latest book.
Right. What is your latest book called?
My latest book, Psychocide Reversal. Psychocide is a term that I coined, talking about the distortion of the human psyche, the crushing of our spirit, our free thinking, our critical
genocide
thinking.
on the psyche, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the book is designed to show people how to reboot. I talk about rebooting the species, and it goes into the nature of subconscious programming, how it runs us, how to identify it, how to go and tease it out. Because, when you have beliefs, you have beliefs, and it's the way the world is, right? Sure. And to change your beliefs, especially your beliefs about yourself, is extremely hard work. Yes. And because the programming happens from such a formative age, before you even know you have a mind of your own, before the age of 2, you're being programmed and you're being steeped in some kind of culture or indoctrination, that gets handed down, that has been handed down ever since that time. So the book explains how to start transforming your programming, how to, it explains how, in fact, that we all attract very particular people, situations, dynamics, circumstances in accordance with how we have been programmed. And this is a very direct link. So depending on our programming, we're going to have more or less of a good life. We're going to have more or less money, more or less love, more or less ease, more or less fulfillment. And it's a pivotal link to make, a connection that people really, if they make that link, that connection, they can really start to turn things around. And people might say to me, but Olga, there are huge forces at work. There are all these bad people in the world that are doing these bad things. What hope do I have of changing that? The circumstances just are. And that may be true on one level. But the fact is that when we change ourselves, changing our minds about who we are and what's possible, changes everything. Yeah. And I've seen it so many times in working with people. I know it to be true for myself. I've seen magic happen in my life from applying this work and staying deep in this work. And in the book, I also show people how to fill in what I call our missing pieces. Those formative qualities that were stripped away, things like healthy self-acceptance, commitment to self, trust in self, faith in self, respect, having healthy boundaries, all of these simple things that go with being truly human and activating the human spirit, the human being. And that changes everything. So I say too cool. that, when our minds are negatively programmed, they become our biggest saboteurs. And right. when our minds are positively programmed, they become our greatest allies in creating what we want.
Right.
And it's powerful.
That's a really good point. And it seems that you have taken hold of that and have really changed your life also to the positive, despite all the,
yes,
how should I say, the health implications and all the hardships that you had to endure through the technology, through big tech, so to speak, that they are imposing on the entire world.
Yes, and I've taken the stance that I'm not a victim. Yeah. Because I understand the bigger picture and I see how this has come about, that, we're missing all this good stuff, the bad guys are missing all this stuff. It's just a matter of, who's got more power perhaps to wield it. But, I'm not a victim. And I would encourage people who have been affected to try to see the world in that context, to see it not as something that's horrible that's being done to them, but to understand that their body is trying to get them to see what's really missing and what they need to do to get back their autonomy, their faith in themselves, their nutritional stability, their resilience, their life, basically, and to have a life that really works, where they find fulfillment and they find love and they can be expansive in going out into the world and being who they really are and loving that, knowing who they are. Because so many people, so many of us, and like me for a long time, we go around having no clue who we are. We don't really know what we're made of or what we're capable of. And we have all of these powers, telepathy, so many higher faculties that are dormant and are not being utilized.
Yeah, they are. And we notice that too. And I think it's always a sense of also, what do you use it for? I mean, yeah, humans have great power. At some point, people are using them also on the dark side to influence stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's, for us now, and that's also the next question I'd have to you, what would be your message to what can everybody do? I mean, as you say, we're not victims. I like that very much. Mm-hmm. So that means humanity is now faced with this, as you coined it before, that the tech takeover.
Yes.
We see AI on the rise. We see 5G, 6G, everything being increased, white zones to be eliminated and stuff.
Yeah.
And I really like to point that it's not because we're the victims of this, but what do you think is humanity's task now in this? Why are we faced with this? What can everybody do to use this opportunity, this chance that we're...
Yes, so everything that's happening out there is a push to empowerment. And what most people are not aware of, and that we're getting confirmed more and more through neuroscience and quantum physics, is that we are electromagnetic beings. In fact, we know this from getting electrocardiograms and all kinds of stuff in medicine. But our thoughts are electrical, our emotions are magnetic, and we are always transmitting. We're always interacting with this seamless field of energy that connects us all. It surrounds us all, we interact in it, we affect each other through it, and we can use it to access higher awareness, higher consciousness. So understanding that we are electromagnetic beings and that we are meant to radiate that out in a positive, loving, collaborative kind of way, rather than to be irradiated by this other synthetic, man-made, non-human version of an electromagnetic field. So when we understand the programming and we understand the beliefs that we have, the negative beliefs, the insecurities, the self-doubts, the put-downs, all of the stuff that happens, in our heads, and the way we therefore live, and the way we interact with other people and react to other people, all of this stuff gives us a very good idea of just how much programming we've got going on. Because we're not meant to be that way. We're not meant to live in fear. We're not meant to be anxious and nervous all the time and to worry about getting into trouble with authorities or having to conform or obey. None of that is the way it's meant to be.
Right.
So it's coming back to what it means to be human. And, you know, I go into all of this in the book. I also talk about how we need to think in terms of putting the planet first. That obviously that's not what's happening in terms of what governments are doing and industry is doing, with radiation coming from above and around us all over. But we personally, each of us, by starting to make different choices, have more power than ranting and railing against what's been done to us. That changes nothing. And we become a victim when we do that. So the important thing to remember is that it's what we do, the choices we make, what we demonstrate, not what we think or say even, but what we actually demonstrate. Are we demonstrating healthy self-respect? Are we demonstrating respect for others? Because the interesting thing to notice here is that if you look at all of the dynamics being played out, you know, by those in power, the ruling elite or whatever, violating our human rights, disregarding our boundaries. In fact, wireless radiation completely disregards all human boundaries.
Totally, yeah.
So, yeah, and, you know, disrespecting us as humans, all of the things that are being done to us by government, manipulating us, not being truthful or honest about what's happening, we do all of those things.
Oh, yeah.
We do all of those things in our own lives. We manipulate other people. We say one thing, we do another, we mean another. We say yes when we want to say no. We make compromises all over the place because we desperately want to be accepted and loved. And that's because of what's missing. So we've become distorted. Our humanity has been distorted by this programming, and recognizing that and then taking charge of that and starting to demonstrate healthy self-worth and self-respect and have healthy boundaries, and regardless of what's happening out there, to do it in the face of not getting what it is that we're missing. Because in relationships so often we think, well, you just won't commit. That guy is a total loser, just won't commit. But in us, there is something that has actually attracted that guy and brought that partner to us to trigger what's actually going on inside, so that with enough awareness, we can address it. We can see what's really happening. We can see where it's really coming from. And when we start to fill in those missing pieces in the practical ways I describe in the book, everything changes on the outside. We start to break those cycles and we start to attract something very different. And this is how we power up. This is how we change what's happening out there in the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I personally believe also one of these cycles, in my view, also is that the cycle of individualism or egoism, where it's all about me. And like, oh, there are people suffering from radiation. I'm not suffering, so who cares, you know? And that's also something that a cycle which I wish could be broken through this experience that we're having, that more and more people are feeling it, that we feel for each other and that we understand that there is something to it, even though government doesn't say it, and that humanity understands that we're one organism, we all are interconnected. I mean, how do you see that? Do you think that would be also a positive change, or a cycle that should be broken?
Well, only we can break it.
Yeah.
Honestly, you know, it's not going to happen by declaiming what's happening out there, by blaming the bad guys from coming at us with this stuff. Even if the bad guys were removed, there'd be others to replace them. It wouldn't change anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're it. This is what it comes down to. And it's ironic too, because in so many cases where people are really backed into a corner because of the radiation, they don't have a life, they're isolated, they have to withdraw, they're left with just the self. And ideally, at that point, they get to see that the self is where the answer is, because we're both the problem and the solution. So, you know, that's what I try to share with people, encourage them to look deeply at the power that they have to make those changes, and to not rely on governments, not wait for regulatory bodies to do anything, because they don't. And they have their own agendas that have nothing to do with our health or safety or freedom. We know this. So yes, it's really up to us to change how we perceive ourselves to be, what we're capable of, what's going on in our minds, and transform that programming so that everything in our environment, in our world, starts to shift.
Beautifully said. Well, is there anything you still want to add on, like your latest book here, Psychocide Reversal, or EMF Off, your 2018 book?
Well, in the book, because it's all about rebooting the species, it's fairly comprehensive. So I look at the mind, work a lot with the mind and the exercises. In fact, there's a separate downloadable book of exercises that people can work through to do this deeper work, because it's quite challenging. Changing yourself is quite challenging. It's the most powerful thing you can do. But also in there is stuff relating to nutrition. And I've discovered some things that have really made a huge difference for me. It goes against a lot of what's sort of being touted out there as being the way to eat, vegetarianism, veganism. But in fact, again, going back to what worked for our ancestors so beautifully, we are actually much better off and much more nourished when we eat more animal-based foods. Not everybody can do it, but most people actually need it. But one of the things I discovered in my quest for more resilience and really shoring up my health and getting strong again was the issue of oxalates, which I talk about in the book. Now, oxalates, it's an oxalic acid that is found in many foods, mostly foods eaten by vegetarians. It's not in animal foods. And it disrupts, in the same way that wireless disrupts, it disrupts our electrolytes, causes havoc with the electrolytes, because when we eat this stuff, and it's in things like nuts and seeds and spinach and dark chocolate and all the supposedly really good things, superfoods, they have very, very high content of this oxalate. And it's one of the things that can lead to huge problems, a cascade of problems in the body, because once you disrupt the electrolytes, so the sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, everything gets thrown off. And you get all kinds of stuff happening. Kidney disease is kind of the end point of that, and it's the only time that now in conventional medicine oxalate is even talked about. But it happens much, much sooner up the chain. People who have gone on the oxalate reducing diet, as I have found themselves to be much more resilient to EMFs. And there are a lot of things in wireless radiation that also trigger oxalate production, so that makes it worse. It's a whole sort of complex thing to unpick, but can make a huge difference for people in terms of their health and their resilience, just dealing with all the contaminants that are in our environment, including the wireless radiation. So that made a huge difference for me, and it's one of the things I really flag now for people who I might see those symptoms in. Because the oxalate binds with our minerals and pulls them out of where they need to be, and we end up with things like osteoporosis. People age rapidly because of that degeneration of their whole skeletal system. Okay. It's a whole syndrome. So that's another piece that I cover in there, along with general nutrition. Wow. And the pieces that we need to have in place to be really healthy.
An interesting building block.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, wonderful. Maybe one last question before we land, and that would be, imagine you're in an elevator with the head of the ICNIRP, which is a regulatory agency.
Self-appointed.
Yes. Self-appointed, right, advising all governments of the world, at least many of them, on the threshold values. What would be your elevator pitch to that person?
Oof. Yes. I think I would talk about the power of being fully human. I wouldn't talk about the science. I wouldn't debate that with them. There's no point, because
he knows it anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're going to have their spin on it, which I know isn't valid. And there's all kinds of industry propaganda out there that is, has convinced a lot of people, but not me, not anymore. I know more of what's really happening and the deeper truth around this stuff. Having worked for WHO, I know what really goes on, and I know that they have suppressed all of their own documentation that goes back to 1975 and before.
Wow.
So I know. Don't try to tell me.
Sorry, I have to interject there. What does it mean they suppressed their own information?
Well, they had documents that I still have managed to get hold of that very clearly spelled out the harm caused by wireless radiation. And then when they got on board with industry, and industry was actually funding them, and they were severely compromised, and even their EMF unit is run by somebody, not a doctor, who was an engineer who used to work for the mobile phone telecommunications industry.
Oh, great.
So, I mean, really, the conflicts of interest are just so massive, it's almost a joke. So, yes, I know this stuff. There's no point in, I've seen it up close.
Sure.
So I get that. And I would speak about being human.
Yes.
And appeal to hopefully their humanity, whatever humanity they have, that I can reach, and talk about how amazing I have found it to withdraw from the radiation, to tap into what I'm really capable of, and understand the deeper push that wireless radiation represents for all of us to go back in order to go forward, to go back to what's natural and healthy for us as human beings, and from there to go forward and start creating a world that works.
Wonderful. Well, I hope it would convince him. Well, Steve Jobs didn't give his kids iPads and stuff, so I think the higher ups, they know a bit, you know, at least what it does technically.
Yes.
But I think the finding the power that's within us, or our connection to, as you said, I would say God, but the real connection that empowers us, that shows us who we're really supposed to be, gives us real purpose. As you said before, that's a real deal. So thanks for sharing this.
Yeah. And it really doesn't matter whether we convince anybody of our argument, whether we get them to change their mind. The important thing is that we change. And we do that through interacting with others. Our subconscious needs to hear us talking about who we are. It needs to hear us standing up for ourselves, speaking in a self-respecting, self-accepting way. And that's what changes our programming. We do it by interacting. So while we might wish that they would get it, or that the partner in the relationship would get it, it's we who need to get it. And when we get it and we start to embody that way of thinking and being, then those people will fall away, and we're going to attract a match for that.
Wow. And I believe, I don't know what you think, what would you say, that also empowers or gives us a lot more effectiveness and power in our outreach, in bringing awareness to this world about the topics that people should be aware of.
Yes. I think the only way to have an impact is to really be authentic and to share what we consider to be the truth about our lives. Never try to convince anybody or convert them.
Yes.
But to just embody what we believe and to share that with people, and may inspire them to change also. And so what I like to say to people in a general sense, to help keep them on track with this very challenging work, is that being human is your superpower. It's your most precious, your most potent resource, and we should never let anyone take that away from us.
Wonderful. Well, that said, Olga, where can people find your work, your books?
On my websites, olgasheean.com and emfoff.com. All my work can be found there.
Cool. And is there any other resource you would recommend people if they want to dive deeper in, say, the EMF harms, say, this, what you're writing about?
Well, in my book, there are probably 200 references. Also on my website, I offer lots of resources that people can tap into. Arthur Furstenberg's book, The Invisible Rainbow, is also another wonderful resource. And organizations such as EH Trust, there are many, many fabulous organizations out there doing good work and raising awareness. But I don't know of any of them that are doing this work. So I think putting the two together can be very powerful.
Wonderful. Thanks for this interview, Olga.
Thank you.
You witnessed mobile phone radiation damages? Recorded on Vitopedia, the free encyclopedia for counter voices. www.vitopedia.org/en